Jennifer Gledhill thought she had the perfect life with her boyfriend, Mark, and her devoted mother. But one rainy night, everything changed. When Mark disappeared, Jennifer's worst fears weren't enough to prepare her for the terrifying truth. The danger was closer than she ever imagined. Jennifer Gledhill's life looked perfect from the outside. Every detail seemed carefully arranged to create the image of happiness. A charming suburban home, a stable relationship, and a family bond that others envied. Her mother, Linda Gledhill, was known in the neighborhood as kind, nurturing, and attentive. A mother who seemed genuinely invested in her daughter's well-being. Jennifer often marveled at how close she was to her mom, how easy it was to share her thoughts, worries, and dreams. Most evenings, the two would cook dinner together, talking about their day, laughing over small jokes, and planning for the future. Jennifer's friends often commented on the unique bond between them, saying they wished they had that same kind of relationship with their own parents. Mark, Jennifer's boyfriend of nearly 2 years, fit seamlessly into this picture. He was considerate, charming, and ambitious, always encouraging Jennifer to pursue her passions while building his own career. He had a way of making everyone around him feel at ease, and Jennifer felt a deep sense of security when he was near. He had been talking seriously about moving in with Jennifer, a step that excited her but also made her nervous. The idea of merging lives was thrilling, but it also made her notice subtle things in her mother's behavior she had previously ignored. It started with questions that seemed harmless at first. Her mother would ask where Mark was going, who he was meeting, and when he would be home. Jennifer brushed these questions aside, thinking her mom was simply curious or wanted to know if she was safe. At times, the questions became slightly more pointed, as if Linda were trying to gauge not just Mark's movements, but his thoughts, intentions, and influence over Jennifer. She would casually mention how she hoped Mark wasn't pressuring Jennifer or taking up too much of her time, phrases that seemed protective at first but carried a subtle edge Jennifer couldn't quite identify. Even as she dismissed these little moments, Jennifer began noticing other patterns. Her mother would sometimes appear unexpectedly when Jennifer and Mark were out, claiming she was just passing by or had errands nearby. Though Jennifer initially laughed these off, a creeping unease started to grow. It wasn't overtly controlling, but there was a persistent shadow behind her mother's otherwise caring behavior. Jennifer told herself she was being paranoid, that perhaps she was imagining tension where none existed. After all, her life seemed perfect, and it was difficult to reconcile the warmth she felt from her mother with the subtle unease that occasionally prickled at her skin. Despite these small cracks, Jennifer's focus remained on the exciting things in her life. She imagined decorating the new apartment with Mark, hosting dinner parties for friends, and spending weekends exploring new places together. Yet, even in moments of joy, there was an unspoken tension, a weight that Jennifer couldn't yet name. It lingered like a faint shadow in her home, a shadow that would grow darker with time. The questions her mother asked, the unexpected appearances, and the subtle probing into Mark's life were not innocent curiosity. They were the first signs of an obsession that would soon erupt into something far more dangerous. Jennifer, absorbed in her perfect life and blinded by trust, could not yet see the storm quietly gathering beneath the calm surface of her home. The sense of safety she felt with her mother and Mark was beginning to erode, almost imperceptibly, like a crack spreading across a seemingly flawless wall. Each question, each casual remark, each small intrusion was part of a pattern Jennifer would only understand too late. What began as simple parental concern would soon reveal itself as a dark, calculated obsession, and the idyllic life Jennifer took for granted was about to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. One rainy evening, Jennifer waited for Mark to come home, her excitement at the thought of spending the weekend together turning slowly into unease. The hours passed, the sky darkened, and the rain tapped persistently against the windows. Mark had never been late before, not without sending a quick message or call. Jennifer tried to reach him on his phone, dialing again and again, each attempt met with silence, then finally a voicemail greeting she didn't recognize as routine. Her heart began to race. Something felt wrong. She called his friends, hoping someone had seen him or knew where he had gone. They had not. They were as confused as she was. Jennifer's mind raced through possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. Maybe he had been delayed at work. Maybe he had an emergency. But as the night wore on with no word from Mark, panic began to set in. Her mother, Linda, stayed close by, expressing concern and urging Jennifer to stay calm. She insisted that Mark was probably safe and that these things sometimes happened. But Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. By midnight, Jennifer contacted the police. Officers arrived quickly, taking statements, noting details about Mark's last known movements, and trying to piece together a timeline. They treated it as a standard missing person case at first, asking about friends, hangouts, workplaces, and routines. Jennifer retraced Mark's steps in her mind, trying to remember if he had mentioned meeting anyone or going anywhere unusual. Everything seemed normal, which made the worry all the more intense. As the investigation began, Jennifer's mother continued to act worried. She sat with Jennifer late into the night, tears streaming down her face, insisting that she hoped Mark was safe and praying that he would come home. Jennifer clung to these displays of concern, grateful for her mother's comfort, even as a small part of her began to notice inconsistencies. Linda's expressions of worry seemed a little too rehearsed, too controlled. She never suggested that perhaps someone close to Mark could be involved, never pressed for answers herself beyond urging Jennifer to stay calm. Jennifer, desperate for hope, dismissed the feeling, convincing herself it was just fear clouding her judgment. As days passed, sleepless nights and unanswered calls eroded Jennifer's sense of reality. She checked every place Mark had been, retracing streets and visiting his favorite spots, but no one had seen him. Friends began to offer their support, bringing meals and checking in constantly, but even their presence could not chase away the gnawing dread inside her. Jennifer began noticing small details that seemed out of place. Mark's jacket left behind, a pair of keys she hadn't seen before, and the unnerving quiet of her mother's behavior when the police asked questions about Mark's personal life. Through it all, Jennifer held on to hope. She imagined Mark walking through the door, apologizing for the long delay, explaining everything, and life returning to normal. She did not yet realize that danger had been closer than she ever imagined, lurking in the very home she trusted. The sense of security that she had once taken for granted was gone, replaced by a creeping tension that refused to leave. Every unanswered call and every silent hour pressed down on her chest, foreshadowing the storm that was quietly unfolding, a storm that would reveal the unimaginable truth about the person she thought she knew best. Days had passed since Mark's disappearance, and with each one, Jennifer's hope began to waver. The police were still following leads, but nothing concrete had surfaced. Every day felt heavier, the silence of Mark's absence pressing on her like a constant weight. She found herself scanning her phone compulsively, hoping for a message, a call, or even a clue that might explain where he was. Then the first strange note arrived. It was slipped under her door in the early morning, handwritten in a jagged scrawl that made her stomach twist. It read, "Not everyone wants him here." At first, Jennifer thought it was a prank, perhaps from someone at work or school. But the handwriting was unfamiliar, and the phrasing unsettled her. Over the next few days, more notes appeared, sometimes tucked into her mailbox, sometimes slid between pages of her books, and once taped under her windshield. Each one hinted that Mark's disappearance was deliberate, that it was tied to someone who wanted him gone. The fear she had been feeling, which she had tried to dismiss as anxiety, and grief, began to grow into a chilling certainty that someone close to her life had orchestrated something sinister. Jennifer started noticing details she had previously overlooked. Her mother's behavior, once comforting, began to feel strange and off-kilter. Linda would claim she had errands to run or appointments to attend, but Jennifer would catch her appearing in places she hadn't mentioned. At first, Jennifer questioned herself. Maybe she had forgotten, or maybe her mother had simply changed plans. but the frequency and timing were odd, too deliberate to be coincidental. Her mother seemed to be always around, always observing, yet maintaining an appearance of worry and helplessness. The inconsistencies gnawed at Jennifer's mind, creating a tension that made her wonder if the person she had trusted most might not be entirely honest. Then Jennifer noticed that some of Mark's belongings were missing from her home. His jacket was gone, along with a few personal items she knew he had left behind. His favorite watch, the keys to his apartment, and even small things that seemed insignificant, items that could only have been taken by someone with intimate knowledge of their routines and the home. Fear began creeping in, a cold, heavy presence that made it hard for her to breathe. The thought that the person she had shared her life with, her mother, might be involved seemed absurd, but the evidence quietly piled up in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she didn't want to complete. Jennifer tried to push the fear aside, telling herself she could be overreacting, that her grief was making her see patterns that weren't real. Yet the anonymous messages kept coming, each one sharper, more threatening, hinting at a hidden truth she wasn't ready to face. She began watching her mother more closely, noting every movement, every pause, every half-truth. The sense of safety she had always felt in her own home evaporated, replaced by a suffocating anxiety that whispered the possibility of betrayal. The life Jennifer had known, the life she had believed was filled with love, trust, and family, was quietly unraveling around her. With each passing day, the chilling reality became harder to ignore. Whoever was behind Mark's disappearance was not a stranger. They were close, someone who knew his routines, someone who knew how to make Jennifer trust them even as they plotted something horrifying. The unsettling clues left Jennifer teetering between disbelief and dread, each new discovery tightening the invisible grip of fear around her chest. She sensed the darkness closing in, but she had no idea how close it really was, or how much of her life had already been manipulated without her knowledge. The unease Jennifer had felt for weeks had reached a breaking point. Each anonymous message, each missing item, and each unexplained appearance by her mother had built into a pressure she could no longer ignore. She realized she had to confront the possibility that someone she trusted completely could be involved in Mark's disappearance. The thought terrified her, but the gnawing fear, the silent suspicion that had been growing in the back of her mind, demanded answers. One rainy afternoon, when her mother was out running errands, Jennifer decided to search through her mother's belongings, something she had never imagined doing. Her hands trembled as she lifted boxes in the attic, pushed aside old furniture, and checked drawers that had always seemed off-limits. Hours passed. Just as exhaustion threatened to overtake her, Jennifer's fingers brushed against a panel in the attic wall that felt slightly loose. Heart pounding, she pried it open and froze. Hidden inside was a small stash of items that made her stomach twist. There was Mark's leather wallet, his watch, and a notebook filled with pages of his personal thoughts and plans. These were things no one should have had access to after his disappearance, items so private they felt almost sacred, yet here they were, carefully hidden behind a false panel in the home she had shared with her mother. Jennifer's hands shook as she held the notebook, reading fragments of Mark's writing. It felt like holding pieces of a life that had been stolen from her, proof that her worst suspicions were true. Jennifer immediately contacted the police. The investigation that followed was horrifying. Forensic evidence confirmed that Mark had been murdered weeks ago. Even more shocking, everything pointed directly to her mother. The idea seemed impossible at first. Linda, the woman who had raised her, the woman Jennifer had trusted above all else, was responsible. The motive, investigators explained, was rooted in twisted jealousy. Her mother had believed that Mark was taking Jennifer away, that he was a threat to the bond she had cultivated with her daughter. In her mind, controlling Jennifer's life meant eliminating what she perceived as a rival. The realization was chilling. The very person who had promised protection, who had always claimed to love her unconditionally, had destroyed the life Jennifer had been building with Mark, acting before their relationship could go too far. Jennifer felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. The betrayal was unbearable. Her life, the love she had known, and the trust she had placed in her mother had all been manipulated and shattered. She struggled to breathe, the pain cutting deeper than the loss of Mark ever could. The house, which had always felt safe, now seemed oppressive, filled with the evidence of her mother's secret obsession. Memories of small, controlling behaviors, casual remarks, and unexplained absences suddenly took on a sinister meaning. Every protective gesture her mother had made now seemed like part of a meticulously crafted plan to isolate her and maintain control. The emotional weight of the discovery was overwhelming. Jennifer felt a mixture of grief, disbelief, and rage, realizing that her mother had not only killed the man she loved, but had also attempted to erase him from her life entirely. The enormity of the deception and the depth of the betrayal made her question everything she had believed about family, trust, and love. In that moment, she understood that her life would never be the same. The person she had turned to for safety had become the source of the most devastating pain she could imagine, and the path forward would require a strength she wasn't too sure she possessed, but one she would have to find if she wanted to survive and reclaim her life. The arrest of Jennifer's mother was surreal, like stepping into a nightmare she could not wake from. The police had gathered overwhelming evidence, and confronted with the facts, Linda Gledhill eventually confessed. She admitted to the murder of Mark, revealing the twisted jealousy that had driven her to commit the unthinkable. Jennifer listened in stunned silence as the details unfolded, each revelation hitting harder than the last. The woman she had trusted more than anyone in the world had meticulously planned and executed an act that destroyed not only a young life, but her daughter's sense of safety, love, and trust. The courtroom was tense and charged with emotion during the trial. Friends and family of Jennifer and Mark testified, revealing fragments of a pattern of control and obsession that had been hidden behind a mask of care. The media coverage amplified the horror, but for Jennifer, the most difficult part was confronting the reality that the betrayal came from her own mother. Grief was relentless. Jennifer struggled to reconcile the loving mother she remembered with the cold, calculating person who had murdered the man she loved. Anger followed closely behind grief, boiling in moments when memories of her mother's manipulations surfaced. Confusion and disbelief gnawed at her constantly. How could someone so close, so familiar, commit such an act? Why had she failed to see the warning signs? The emotional weight was nearly unbearable, and for weeks, Jennifer found herself trapped between sorrow and shock, unable to move forward, yet unable to retreat entirely from life. Slowly, with support from friends and dedicated therapy, Jennifer began to rebuild. She moved out of the family home, leaving behind the walls that had witnessed both love and betrayal. Each step she took was painful, yet necessary, a reclaiming of space that was no longer tainted by fear. Therapy helped her untangle the complex web of emotions, guiding her toward understanding and resilience. She allowed herself to grieve for Mark fully, to feel the anger, the loss, and the despair, without letting those feelings consume her entirely. Her friends became anchors, offering companionship, stability, and reminders that trust and love could exist outside the shadows of her mother's actions. In time, Jennifer found a new purpose in sharing her story. She spoke openly about the dangers that could hide in familiar spaces, the signs of manipulation, and the importance of trusting one's instincts, even in relationships with loved ones. Each retelling was a reclaiming of power, transforming a story of pain into a warning that might protect others. Though haunted by memories, she discovered that surviving the unimaginable could also lead to growth, self-awareness, and an unexpected strength she had never known she possessed. Jennifer's life would never be the same. The trauma she endured left indelible marks. Yet she also learned that survival was possible, and hope could emerge even after the darkest betrayals. She found ways to honor Mark's memory, rebuild her sense of self, and create a future defined not by fear, but by resilience. The path was neither straight nor easy, But Jennifer discovered that even in the aftermath of unimaginable pain, she could reclaim her life, rebuild trust in herself, and eventually allow the possibility of happiness to return.